Hello, everybody. This is Michael Regina. I'm the creator of the Adamsville comics on Webtoons, and I'm figured I'm going to pick back up doing a live stream. I actually started doing live streams recently, and I thought about something that would maybe be a bit of fun would be to kind of pick up an old podcast or video cast that I used to do a long time ago, and use it as a platform to maybe talk a little bit about what I'm creating, how I'm creating, things I'm thinking about, and show you a little bit of the work I'm doing on Adamsville. And so I figured I'd pick this podcast back up. So I'm working on a page for Adamsville 3. I figure I'll show the page a little bit. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight was um, dealing with discouragement as an artist. Basically, over the last few years, or the last year or so, I guess I would say, I've really been struggling with discouragement in my art. And not so much from the standpoint of like thinking my art is bad or thinking that I can't create good art, but more the discouragement that comes with feeling, I guess, burnt out would be the best way I would put it. Essentially, since I decided to pick up making Adamsville about 5 years ago, going on 5.5 years ago, I've been working at a very kind of full tilt pace on the books. I sort of took up the mentality when I started them that if I was going to make a comic and if I really wanted to give this thing a go, whether I was doing it full time or not, I essentially needed to treat it like a full time job. And so I started creating at a very fast rate. And that led to a lot of really cool things, like basically, I was able to finish a 160-page graphic novel while holding a full-time job and having a kid, two kids at the time actually, all in the span of about a year and a half, and it was amazing how much productivity I was able to get out of that year when I really put my mind to it. And then about a year or two later, the deal with Webtoons came along, and it was an amazing opportunity to work with Webtoons. But then it was like the workload went from being manageable to like breakneck speed. There was zero time to really spend thinking about my art, thinking about my craft, thinking about how to get better. And the work started to become work, basically. Creating comics became work for me. And it was a really discouraging realization over the last few years when I realized, wait a minute, over the last year, I should say, I keep saying a few years, but really over the last year, where I realized I wasn't really excited about comics anymore. Necessarily making them or reading them. I didn't have the same sort of drive for the books like I used to, and for making the books like I used to. And I talked about this with some of my friends, like Josh Ulrich, who creates Jackie Rose, and Newman for Webtoons as well. And Josh and I really came into comics together. We we found each other through the flight forums years and years ago, and we became friends. And we really discovered how to make comics together. And I told him, I said, "Man, you know, I feel like we've lost this sort of awesome connection, this excitement for comics. We used to go to the bookstore and we walk around and we get all excited about all the different books and we dissect over things and we talk about it and we talk about how to be better at our business and how to grow our audience and how to make the comics better. And what we really kind of learned was that part of the reason why we're not talking about that is that making comics became work to the point that the only thing we wanted to do was get the work done and then like move on with life. And it wasn't that we weren't necessarily excited about the work we were making or that we were not giving it our best, but there definitely was a feeling of, I guess the best way I know to put, burnout. We felt burnt out on making comics. And so we were spending a lot of time, and still now, doing things like playing video games and other stuff like that to give ourselves a mental break. But what happened over time is, at least for me, um, all I was doing was basically making the comic, playing video games, and just or whenever I had the extra time, reading my Bible, playing with the kids, whatever. But what happened is like the affection I had for comics, for making them, and for learning about them and growing at them and being better, kind of got shifted over towards just like the desire to have free time. And all my excitement was going into like how do I get better at this game that I'm really into. I love the game Hearthstone, by the way, and so I play that game a lot. And but I realized, wait a minute, the reason why. So there's sort of this principle that your heart kind of goes, your affections show where your heart is, and the time that you spend on something. And I realized that all the time that I should have been spending reading comics, getting better at them, discovering new artists, was being poured into things like playing video games or taking naps. And I wasn't allowing myself any time to be excited about making comics again. And so I guess the gist of this was I realized that what I needed to do was turn my affections back to my comics by cutting out things in my life. So I tried to really pull back on playing as many games as I used to, or thinking about it quite as intently. And I don't do a great job with this, especially now that the game has announced its latest expansion and all that stuff. It's been a lot harder to keep myself focused. But I'm trying my best, and what I'm trying to do is spend more time every day reading books, grabbing comics that I haven't read before, and learning a little bit more from them. And then just pushing my drawing, like getting excited about, okay, what do I need to do? How can I be better at drawing the figure in this way? What is it that I'm lacking, and how can I improve on it? And so, like with these recent Adamsville pages, I'm doing a car chase for the first time, and that's a really exciting thing. And so, what I'm trying to do is spend time looking at famous car chase sequences in movies. So I'm looking at stuff like, especially since in Adamsville they're running away from giant monsters. I'm pulling up the movie The War of the Worlds that Steven Spielberg directed, and that opening, that car chase sequence when the tripod comes out of the ground and is chasing the cars is just awesome. And so I'm looking at that for inspiration and thinking, well, how can I apply that sort of thing to my books? And another thing that I did is I felt like, man, I've really lost this sense of connectivity with my audience. So I started the live streams up, which has been great because right now, since Adamsville's on a break, I don't get to interact with my audience on a weekly basis through Webtoons like I had before. So getting that opportunity once a week just to go online, have people who are reading my comics, who like my comics, hanging out and talking with me about what they're making or if they have questions, and then getting some of my friends to pop up on the stream that have been making comics with me for years has just made the whole, has really helped me get some of that magic back. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is I don't know if you guys don't have this experience, maybe it's hard for you to relate, but I imagine that what kind of happens to many of you and many other artists and those just kind of creating art for fun in their downtime is that I guess the troubles, the trials of your work, um, your life, I guess, can eventually crop out your love for creating art. And I guess what I'm honing in on is saying do a couple of things to fix that. One, make sure that you're creating projects that you're excited about. And the minute that they start becoming stale, um, go against that grain and find something new that you can create. Also, or think about it in a different way. So, like for instance, with Adamsville, there is some story decisions I made with book three that were pretty bold, I feel like. And for those who were kind of waiting for the books to come out, I won't dive into it. But I decided that I was going to go much more mythical and much broader with the books, even though a lot of me is worried about how that's going to get received by my audience. I felt like that's where my excitement is as a creator. So I'm going to go down these paths and have really weird moments in the books involving trees that may or may not be mythical in nature, and things like the beginning of the world and all that sort of stuff, and really tying in Adamsville to a lot of the things that I'm really excited about. Just as a person, like I love studying alternate history and alternative history and that sort of stuff. So I'm like, well, let's throw some of that into Adamsville. And what's been great is my audience has responded in kind, and it's made me more excited about creating my books. Also, I think um, get a good circle around you of people who are excited about making art as well. And for me, I've got a close knit group of artist friends that I've been making comics with for forever. And we talk to each other pretty regularly, at least a few of us do. And then the rest, if I have questions or I'm just wondering how they're doing, I send them messages. I get on the old phone, give them a call, and but surrounding yourself with other people who are excited about the work just like you are is really helpful because it helps you to reconnect with that desire. If you're all sitting around talking about how excited you are for that new video game that's coming out, um, it's hard to stay excited about your comics because all your affections and your interests are being poured into a video game or a book or a TV show. And while all those things are fun and cool, find some balance is basically what I'm saying. So like for me it was I'm going to delete Hearthstone off my phone. I subsequently put it back on. I had like a week. I said I'm going to see how I do with a week without Hearthstone being on my phone. I deleted Facebook and Twitter from my phone, and basically said, what can I do that if I have free time, I will spend it on comics or thinking about comics. And so removing those things has helped me. Like I said, I put Hearthstone back on, but honestly, the last few days I've had a lot of bad experiences where I'm spending way too much time playing that game and not enough time thinking about my story, thinking about how can I improve it, or just rather instead of playing that game, if I have a down moment, why not bring a book with me? And instead of popping that game out, I'll pick up a comic that I've been meaning to read, and I'll spend 5-10 minutes reading a few pages of that comic, constantly being infused with more inspiration. So surrounding yourself with the art and things that remind you of the art is really important. So I'm spending more time talking to my friends about my art. I'm reading more books. Those things are really helpful and key. And I think lastly, what I would say is be thinking about what uh, be thinking about what you want to make next. So if you're finding that the project that you're working on is starting to feel stale, or you wish that you had something else to work on, maybe take some time to create some art that isn't related to that project. So if I find myself roadblocked with Adamsville and I'm like, man, I'm just not feeling the excitement or the drive to work on this book like I normally do, I take out one of the projects I'm working on creating next, and I kind of spend a little time in the script there, or I'll design some characters, or I'll work a little bit on the treatment and think about how I'm going to pitch the book. And all that does is it serves to just get me thinking about something else so that I can be excited about what I'm working on, and it's still advancing and moving forward you're creating your comics and creating your work. So I think those three things are really helpful. I would say to cut out distractions in your life, reconnect yourself to people and circumstances that have to do with the art that you're creating. So get around other friends that create comics or paintings or whatever it is that you're creating. Talk about it with them, and spend your energies on that. And then also, if things are feeling stale, work on something else that's exciting. So, like throughout Adamsville, I would get a couple of times where I had some breaks, And what I would do is instead of working on Adamsville or trying to get ahead, I said, why don't I go create a pinup of a comic that I really like or a TV show. So like Stranger Things came out last summer, and I just had to be a part of it. So I made this drawing of 11 and the Demogorgon monster from it, and it became like the first like viral piece of comics or art, pinup art that I've ever made. That to where like it was being shared on Twitter and Facebook, and people were buying prints of it, and T Fury picked it up and turned it into a shirt, and that was all really exciting because I took that. I was able to rejuvenate myself with my art by creating something that wasn't Adamsville and allow me to come back to Adamsville excited about how I can create new comics and what will, it also gave me some helpful tools for my tool shed for when I got back to making the comic. So, like for instance, with the 11 pinup that I did, which if you haven't seen it, if you go to michaelerregina.com, it's I think the first post still. I don't post many blogs, unfortunately, and this rambling thing that I'm doing right now is my first attempt at getting back into this. Hopefully I'll get smoother at it as I go. But creating that drawing of 11 was really helpful because I actually said, you know what I want to do is I need to spend some time developing a little bit of a newer style because I'm thinking about how do I want to make art in the next book that I'm making. And so I used a pencil tool in Manga Studio for the first time to ink my illustration rather than using the traditional pen and ink tools that are there. And it gave me such a really cool look and feel that I decided, you know what, I've got some pages in Adamsville coming up where it's this sort of flashback sequence where it explains a lot of the mythology in the series, and I wanted to have somewhat of a different look to it than it had before, than it had when we were in present time in the story. So I said it was so successful, and I was so excited about it that I inked the entire section of the story that happened at that point in that style, and it came out really great. And I felt like I improved as an artist by doing it, and it gave me some familiarity with the tools that I didn't have before, so that in the future, if I am going to use that style, I know what I need to adjust, what I need to tweak, and what ultimately I do and don't like about the style. And so it just got me thinking outside the box. So those are just my thoughts on what you can do to break some of the funk or the feeling of discouragement you might have in creating your art. If you have thoughts on things that you do, I'd love to hear about them. So feel free to leave them in the comments. Like I said, I want to try to do this a little bit more regularly. So I'm going to try to do maybe one a week. I've got a list of topics I'd like to talk through, and I'll think about how I can improve these videos. But really, it's just me kind of taking some time to talk about what I'm up to and what I'm thinking and feeling. So it was a pretty discouraging time, honestly. I really felt like, man, why am I not in love with making comics the way I should? This is what I want to be doing. Why am I not as excited about it as I should? And I took some proactive steps to fixing it, and I actually feel like, I'm back to being excited about making comics again and making the book that I'm in, that I've cared about for going on 9 years now, and producing it for the last 5. So those are my thoughts. Look forward to talking with you next time, and thanks for checking out the chat. I hope it's been encouraging to you, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.